Welcome to Settling is Bullshit, a sweary podcast about claiming your joy. If you are an adult human craving healthier boundaries, a greater sense of purpose, or an increased capacity to feel at ease in your own skin, then you are in the right place, my friend. I'm your host, Kate Blauk, and I'm here to offer you practical tools and playful encouragement to help you step forward and be your most awesome self. My hope is that each episode will leave you feeling a bit more empowered to make brave choices and claim your joy. Oh my gosh, everybody. I am here with Dawn Church today to talk about self-love and self-care and what the fuck all of that even means. Dawn is an amazing, sparkly, wonderful human who I adore. Full disclosure, she's one of my dear friends. So this is going to be a really fun conversation for me and hopefully fun for you too. Dawn is a personal coach who brings together science and heart in her company, Tempered.life. She's really, really good at coaching. Not going to lie. She's good at it. So welcome, Dawn. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. I know that the listeners can't see my face right now, but like my smile is like practically to my ears. I'm like cracking up because I don't even know what do I say to follow up to that? That's like the best introduction ever. Other than that, Kate is also one of my really amazing besties. And so I'm super excited about this conversation too.
Perfect. That was lovely, right? We all get to learn how to take compliments.
Accepting compliments is for sure a form of self-love.
What? Oh my gosh. Wait a minute. So like somebody else giving you a compliment and accepting it is self-love. Tell me more.
Yeah, for sure. So just to kind of lay a little bit of groundwork before we kind of get into that, the way that I define self-love is embracing all of who you are with a lot of compassion, care, commitment, celebration, and curiosity. There's a lot of C's in there, I know.
So many
But
C's.
all the C's.
But we're going to sail the C's. We're going to sail them.
Yes. I love a good pun at the start of a podcast.
Right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
The 5 C's. We're going to sail the 5 C's. So accepting compliments is a form of self-care because we are kind of almost like opening ourselves up to being celebrated, to looking at ourselves and saying, yeah, okay, that is worth loving. That is worth being curious about. That is worth committing to. And I kind of love, my relationships with compliments is actually a really good example of, or a really good like sort of reflection point. I struggle with accepting compliments very much.
I mean, I can relate to that. I think that's very relatable. A lot of us humans, who at least the humans that are going to be listening to this podcast, I think, struggle with accepting compliments.
Yeah, we struggle with accepting compliments, and the inquiry there can be why. Why do I struggle with accepting compliments? And what about me do I feel like is unworthy of being loved or being celebrated? And then that is sort of like a good little bit of a lead into your work in self-love or self-care, is that exploration of like, oh, why? And if you're the type of person who's like, hey, self compliments and all the things, these feel really great, then like, hey, kudos to you. Your self-love is probably doing really well right now. And if you're not, then that can be kind of a good signal for you of maybe that's a place that you want to do some work, do some exploration.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm hearing self-love, self-care, self-awareness. These are all interrelated things. How are they different?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So I've already kind of defined self-love, just the embracing of all of who you are.
The 5 C's.
The 5 C's, yes. Self-care, I define as attending to the fulfillment of your needs and nurturing your flourishing. And I know that there's a lot out in pop culture world that says self-care is bubble baths and buying yourself flowers and candy and all the sugar and fluff. And those things are great, but they're not really the purpose of self-care. Self-care is very much about meeting your needs and nurturing your flourishing. So we'll just underpin that. And then self-awareness is sort of the foundation for how we're going to do that. Self-awareness is the knowledge and presence to who we are in a given moment and also everything that we're showing up with. So, our history, our personality, our baggage, our hopes and dreams, whether that's on the macro or the micro scale. But in order to love ourselves and embrace all of who we are, in order to self care and attend to the fulfillment of our needs and nurture our flourishing, we first have to have an awareness of who we are and have the capacity to ask ourselves, what is it that we need? And so
Mm.
our whole lives, we encounter stuff in our environment. We have experiences that sort of shape and shift our personality and the way in which that we interact with in life. And sometimes that is reflective of our core truth. And then also sometimes it's like a coping mechanism that we develop or a guard that we've put up. And sometimes those guards and those walls not only keep the world separate from us, but keep us separate from our core truth. And so the work of self awareness is looking at those guards and those coping mechanisms and trying to go a little bit deeper.
What does cultivating one's self-awareness look like?
Yeah, cultivating self awareness is very much like a practice, an active practice of doing the work of looking within and getting to know yourself. We can almost kind of compare this to dating another person. We aren't necessarily going to go on a date and buy them flowers or let them buy us flowers and just stand in front of each other and say, I love you right off the bat without first getting to know the other person. It takes getting to know the other person. And how do we do that? Well, we ask questions. We get curious. We follow our intuition, we play. And that's exactly what you can and should be doing with yourself in order to get towards self awareness and self love and self care.
I love that analogy. Also, I just need to name out loud that this entire time we've been talking about flowers so much that the Miley Cyrus song is just like on repeat in my brain right now.
For
Which
sure.
is pretty great. But
Yeah.
but yeah, like I love that analogy of treating it like dating. I mean, I recently wrote a post about taking yourself on a fucking date, right? That so many of us, I think because, you know, we have lived our whole lives as ourselves. And so
Hmm.
we can fall into the idea that I know myself really well, right? Like I
Yeah.
spend all my time with myself. Of course I know myself. I'm very self-aware. And I don't know that that is true for me. I won't speak for all of y'all who are listening to this, but you know, the more I have leaned into this personal development, self improvement space, you know, the more revelations I tend to have about who I
Hmm.
actually am and what I actually want.
Yeah. And I'm sitting here listening and I'm like watching you and like, I'm like, yeah, Kate is a very self aware person because you have done all of those things. But there are so many people in the world who, even though they live with themselves full time, like you don't get a break from yourself, have no idea who they are. And that can be really hard for people. That can be really confronting. That can cause a lot of friction.
What's I'm so curious about in this moment is like, what does that look like for other folks, right? Like I've been on this like mission to figure myself out for a very long
Hmm.
time. So what have you seen in terms of, I think where I'm going with this is like the idea of how do you know you don't know yourself in order to start getting to know yourself? What does that look
Yeah.
like?
Yeah. Well, and I think, it can be really simple. Like a simple self awareness practice would be to ask yourself that question: who am I? And I know your brain just like went, oh my God. But if you imagine writing yourself a dating profile and needing to describe yourself, or writing yourself a bio for an event and needing to talk about who you are and what you have to say, and nothing comes up, then that's probably a good indicator that you don't super know yourself super well at this point. Another really good indicator for me a lot of times with people is when they don't know what they want. And it's not that they don't know what they want, is that they don't know who they are. Or at some point in their history, they've like cut off connection from who they are. And in order to find what they want, they have to do the work of getting reconnected to who they are.
Mm. Hmm. And so what I'm hearing is that if we want to get to the place of let's talk more about self-love, since that's, ostensibly the point of this episode, right? That it really starts with building that connection with our own internal weather system, right?
Hmm.
It starts with being able to connect with who am I? What do I want? What am I doing?
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the next step is putting that into practice.
Yeah, I think, sort of saying it as like connecting with your internal weather system is a good analogy. Is first we have to connect into like our own internal sense of awareness that tells us, connects us to who we are, what our motivations are, what our history is, what our soul is, what our heart is. And then from there, we can kind of start to play with, okay, well, how much do I like that? How much do I welcome that into the
Mm.
world? How much do I hide that from the world and why? And that inquiry, and then following it up with like meeting the needs of any of those parts that are kind of like unloved. That is the practice of self-love, very much in a nutshell.
Yeah. So I get to know myself, I identify the things, and then the self-love piece is welcoming the parts that when I did that sort of self-review, I'm like, "Oh, but that part too?" Like even
Yeah.
that part,
Yeah.
like even the part of me that, to use a personal example, like yesterday was just a big crying mess because I was lonely. Like that part
Mhm.
too.
Oh, 100%. That part especially. Like, we can have a relationship with ourselves where we stay very much on the surface level and we only deal with the fun and shiny bits, but that is very much the sort of pop culture sort of lens of self-love and self-care, which is a lot of sugar and fluff. But if we want to really lean into being our best whole self so that we can live our best whole lives, we have to do the work of loving the hard parts and attending to those hard parts and their needs and their desires.
Okay. So I'm game. Like to use this is very, timely, relevant example.
Mhm.
So self-awareness yesterday. I was cranky, like I'd had some annoying cancellation things, and then a friend that I'd really been looking forward to seeing canceled our dinner plans, and I just like melted into a giant puddle of tears
Mhm.
of like the big lonelies got loud, and yeah, I felt like a mess, and so I was like very aware of that.
Yeah.
And I feel like I practiced some pretty good self-care. I reached out to a friend, and then I fed myself dinner, and then I melted into my couch and watched a very soothing and charming show about Edwardian farming. Um,
Okay. That's a vibe.
but yeah, it was a vibe. It's very soothing.
Yeah.
There's like nothing terrible happening. It's very documentary and British, and it was nice.
Mhm.
But I feel like as we're talking about all of this, like what is self-love in that moment
Mm.
or
Mhm.
or or in the today?
Yeah, well, so my question to you is, are you up for a little bit of playing with that right now? Little
Yeah. Yeah,
experiment?
let's do
Okay,
it.
cool. Okay. So my invitation to you is just to kind of do a little bit of a check right now, a little bit of, for the listeners, this is kind of some self awareness practice. You can maybe close your eyes if you want and just see what of that is, if anything, what of that is currently alive and present.
Yeah, I mean there's still some tenderness in my heart, right? In my heart space. There's a tightness and a tenderness there of just like, oh man, like I just want more people in my life to hug.
Yeah, I noticed hearing that my heart starts to feel tender and sweet and compassionate and could desire to hug you for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm curious now if you were to sort of take that tenderness part of you, that part of you that wants more people in your life to hug. And you can, if you want, you can kind of imagine that part of you sort of out in front of you, or just see it in your heart and ask that part of you, like, hey, what is it that you need right now?
Yeah, I mean, well, it needs a hug, um, for one thing, and I don't know, like, that part of me feels very, like, young and, like, Lisa Frank,
Mhm.
sparkles and stuffed animals and just, like, it needs a gold star because 'cause I've been
Mhm.
working really hard, you
Mhm.
know, and yeah, like, maybe some pizza and ice cream. Like, great, this is definitely, like, middle school me,
Yeah.
who just, like, needs some loving.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm gonna like bookmark that, come back to that. And then I want
Okay.
to also ask, how does present day, like you in this moment, currently feel about that part of you that has this need?
I mean, present moment, like, in this recording of this podcast and talking about it and, like, naming all of that, like, present moment me is like, "Oh, pumpkin. Like, I'll give
Mhm.
you a hug."
Mhm.
Like, "Okay." Like, that makes sense. I like glitter too. Um, Yesterday me was really frustrated with that part of me.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah. Was, like,
Okay.
really in the, I'm so tired of having these big feelings and having this, like, weepy reaction to something that, quote, unquote, "shouldn't be such a big deal."
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, so we're gonna get kind of almost a little real meta here. And I wanna invite you to sort of turn the lens of today you and ask the same question about, how do you feel about yesterday you? The reaction that she had.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, today I can access the, like, the meta level of my big feelings last night and have a similar, like, "Oh, pumpkin." Like, of course you were having a big meltdown. Like, it's hard
Uh-huh.
when plans get canceled. Like,
Yeah.
like, that's okay.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it's just, like, really difficult for me, and I don't imagine I'm alone in this experience, to access the sort of self-compassion and I think, like, what we're talking about in terms of self-love, like, when I'm in it. Right?
Yeah.
Like, when I'm in the meltdown and in the, like, sad and lonely and don't wanna bother anybody with my feelings, it's
Mhm.
so hard to love myself in that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It is hard, and I can say that for myself even too, and, like, this is a practice that I've been on for, I don't know, however fucking long at this point. A long ass time, okay? Long ass time. It is still hard in those moments of, like, you know, freak out or self-criticism or self-judgment or something, to instantly sort of turn to self-love. But doing the practice and the work outside of those moments does make it easier over time. So we're building up this like sort of muscle. And so I love that from here in this moment in time, you're able to look at those two parts of you and be like, oh, pumpkin. Oh, of course.
Aw.
Yeah. Yeah.
Aw.
Yeah,
I'm
for
just
sure.
sad, like, it's okay, everybody gets sad, like,
Yeah.
everybody gets lonely, that's normal, it's
Yeah. And
okay.
that is normal. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. And so the act of self love here is exactly what you're already doing, which is to look at those parts of you that maybe were struggling for some reason and embrace them from the point of where you're at now.
Okay. So, yeah, like, what I'm hearing in this is that it maybe isn't super realistic for me to expect myself to be like fully welcoming and accepting and, Zen master, whatever, when I'm in the meltdown. It's more about when I'm more regulated, like when I'm on the other side of it, then being able to sort of look at it and be like, "Oh, okay. Like, yeah, I can love you in that,
Hmm.
on the other side of it."
Yeah, there's a little bit of a yes and there because there's the like, yeah, like it's great. That is a great approach to self love or starting point for self love is to like do the work of self love when things are stable. And it is hard to do the work of self love when you're unstable. And eventually, hopefully, the work is to bring some of that muscle memory from when things are stable into the moments that are chaos and meltdown. And it's not so that you don't have the meltdown and the chaos. It's so that in the meltdown and the chaos you can say like this is good too. I need this meltdown and chaos or whatever happens to be, whether it's anger or processing shame or something to that effect because when we can't give ourselves that, what we end up doing is we suppress those feelings. You could have in that moment gotten really angry about being lonely and really self judgmental and really critical of that younger part of you that just really wants that hug, right? And then that would have built up more shame, more resistance, more self denial, and more criticism. And you didn't do that. So kudos to you.
Yeah, I mean, I did like there was a lot of frustration and a lot of like, why do I have to be this way? Um, and thanks to lots of years of working on this, I was able to kind of set the mean voices aside and be like, well, this is what's happening. Like, what do I need in this moment? I called a
Hmm.
friend. I let myself cry to said
Hmm.
friend.
Hmm.
Um, and you know, I think I think what I was hearing in what you just said was just this like we don't get to not feel the feelings, including the ones we don't like on the surface like or that don't feel good.
Hmm.
You said something like that we need to have the meltdown.
Hmm.
Um, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about that just because I need the reminder that like right, that's part of being human and that it is actually helpful. Because I think this was part of why I was interested in talking to you about the messiness of self-love, because we were sort of having a conversation and you were like, "Yeah, like having a meltdown is self-love." And I was like, "What are
Hmm.
you talking about, Dawn?"
Hmm. Yeah. So meltdowns are totally a form of self-love and self-care. And here's the reason why that I think anyway. Anytime that we try to suppress or hide a part of ourselves for whatever reason, maybe it's like shamed by the outside world, or we have shamed it ourselves because we think it's going to be rejected or whatever, it turns into almost like a backseat driver. That's what I call them is a backseat driver. And it starts to like come out sideways and really steer the ship in like a way that you are not gonna love. And anytime that we suppress or hide parts of ourselves, almost always those parts are going to eventually feel hurt. They're going to feel hurt at being locked in a closet. And they're going to develop more and more hurt and more baggage until you do the work of embracing them. But once you do start to do the work of embracing them, you can't just look at it and say, oh, I love you and everything is now fine. Hooray.
No,
It's
I can't
great.
just I can't just be like, "Oh, okay, it's fine. Like you're great." That doesn't
No. You can, but it's not going to work because those parts of you have a need and they come at this point with a lot of baggage. And so in order to accept them and embrace them, you also have to embrace the baggage. You have to feel through the pain of having those parts be hidden and locked in a closet for so long. And that's messy and it's hard, but it is real and authentic and the genuine work of self love. So, meltdowns, 100%, definitely self love and self care.
Okay. I will try to remember this conversation the next time I find myself like in the midst of a meltdown. I'll be like,
Hmm.
this is me loving myself.
Hmm. Yeah.
um yeah. Okay.
And you're going to think of my
So,
face and be like, oh, yeah.
I'm like, okay, Dawn, I believe you. It's
You're
I
like,
like okay. Love
I,
myself. It's fine.
yeah, yeah. I hate it. I hate this. And I
I
love
like
you.
this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. I hate this and I love you.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, like that feels like a nice sort of gentle way in to accessing compassion and care for myself when I'm in those moments.
Hmm.
Um
Yeah.
Because I know for me, I think I can sometimes think that like disliking the experience,
Hmm.
right, means that I'm not, you know, being zen or sufficiently self-loving.
Hmm.
And then for me, that can definitely spiral into fodder for I'm not doing it right. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that that's a really good sort of reflection back on like the narrative that and I think you to some degree are kind of hoping to change about self love is that like pop culture, the world, all the pop songs, I'm Miley Cyrus's Flowers is like playing in my head again. All say that it should be really fun and it should be all sunshine and rainbows and butterflies and bubble baths and all the things. But here's the thing that you've probably heard me say before is that there will be a rainbow, but first there has to be a storm. You have to do the work. You have to go through the authentic stuff, the painful stuff in order to get to the rainbow. And if we just try to skip to the sunshine and the bubble baths and all that, the flowers and things, we aren't really doing self love or self care. All we're doing is continuing to put this parts of us that we don't love into a box and putting a band aid on it and saying, it's done. It did the thing. I've self loved. But then nothing gets better.
right. We can't like bubble bath our way out of our internalized shame and narratives and the gunk
Yeah.
that comes out sideways and gets in the way of our relationships and our capacity to show up in the world in the ways that like we want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. The analogy that's coming at like the metaphor that's coming up for me right now, right, is that like cleaning the bathtub is like the work of self-love so that I can have a clean bathtub in order to enjoy it. Right.
No, I love that. I think that's actually a really great metaphor because if we like, I'm going to solve this issue by taking a bubble bath, but our bathtub is like gross and gunky, and so we just submerge ourselves into the gross and the
Ugh,
gunk without like I'm like my body's like cringing right now. Like, oh,
yeah,
that sounds terrible.
right.
Yeah, you have to do the work of like cleaning the bathtub, and then you can enjoy a bubble bath. I have this like little mantra ish sort of thing that I use to kind of help people think about rethinking self care in an effective way. And it's no more only band aids. Take your medicine, take your vitamins. So band aids sort of like stop the bleeding and are useful for that. Of like, I'm running around like crazy. I don't have a whole lot of time to like slow down and like really attend to the fulfillment of my needs, but I can do this one small thing to put a band aid on it. But if I don't come back and address the cause of the suffering, AKA taking your medicine, it's just going to keep happening. And that band aid's going to like no longer work and it's going to suck. And then taking your vitamins is about how can you build yourself up more to be resilient to the stress in your life what do you need in order to flourish? And so no more only band-aids, take your medicine, take your vitamins.
Mhm. Mhm. Right? So, I'm just thinking about, like, my tendency to overcommit myself, right? That, like, I can clear something off of my calendar,
Mhm,
right? But that
mhm,
doesn't like, that's the Band-Aid, is
mhm,
canceling the whatever thing.
mhm.
But the medicine is digging into, okay, like, what's going on that I'm falling into this impulse of, I have to do all the things, right?
Yeah.
What's the narrative there? And the vitamin is, for me, is putting some policies in place so that I can kind of check those tendencies when they get loud, right? So, for example, I'm currently trying out a policy of, like, no more than 4 things on my calendar in a given day.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
yeah, I okay, real talk, it's 5, but, like, but that came out of, like, a day a couple months ago, not like, last month, where I had 8 things. I had
Yeah.
8 different, like, appointment-y things on my calendar in one day, and I was like, "This
Mhm.
isn't okay." Like, yes, I can cancel the things today. That's the Band-Aid, but, like, we need to
Yeah.
look at this.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's a really good example of, like, canceling the thing is the Band-Aid. Maybe addressing what it is that has you continuing to book so much stuff on your calendar would be the medicine.
Mhm.
So, those policies could be a form of taking the vitamin for sure. But and also another form of vitamins would be like, what is it that you need in order to nurture the type of person that you want to be, the type of day that you want to have, maybe the mission of the work that you're trying to do or the things that you're because you can create policies and strictures, but without really understanding the reason why, you might end up kind of coming out sideways and like doing the same thing in a different way. So that taking the vitamin part is really about like the why, the meaning, the what you need in order to be your best whole self, living your best whole life.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm gonna take that forward. When you asked, like, "What is the day you want to have?" I had this bodily, like, "Oh, I like that question because, like, I
Mhm.
don't actually want to have a day with 8 things on my calendar."
Mhm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I noticed like how your whole demeanor has kind of changed. Like you are smiling, you're looking bright, you're looking like inquisitive and curious and excited about the potential and possibilities. Does that land for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
And, for listeners like that, I just wanna take a moment of, like, that's the kind of thing that happens in a coaching session, right? Like, I just got a little
Mm.
free
Mhm.
coaching session with Dawn of, like, that kind of question to take forward and say, like, "Oh, okay. What do I want my day to look like? What is the why behind these changes I wanna make in my life?"
Mhm.
Right? And I think, right, like, yes, conceptually, we all want to love ourselves, right?
Mhm.
Like, self-love, like, on paper,
Mhm.
right? Sounds great. We should all love ourselves. But, like, what's the why behind that? Like, how is that going to change or improve or make my life ultimately better and easier and more nourishing and thriving? Getting to the heart of that is gonna help me stay dedicated and committed to the practice and in the
Mhm.
messiness.
Yeah, I think that's very good clarification for sure about why this is important. And it kind of brings me back for me to like my whole bit about wholeness being kind of the key to your best life. And so this is what I tell people about wholeness because this is another thing that I think is kind of having a moment in pop culture the way that pop culture talks about wholeness as if it is a destination that's going to fix your life and make everything perfect, as if it's something that you're working towards that you don't already have now. And
Mm.
here's the thing you are never, ever not whole, ever. Your wholeness
What?
is purely, I know, right? Crazy. you are already whole right now. 100%. You are already whole. You have absolutely everything that you need within you in order to create the life that you love and to love the life that you live. And the the thing about this is that our wholeness includes all of the parts of us that we have attempted to kind of box up and hide that are now just sort of coming out sideways and backseat driving. So when I talk about your whole self being the key to your best life, I mean very much looking at the whole picture that you have and then working to kind of integrate and rebalance those pieces that you've suppressed, getting everything working in order and collaborating and co-piloting as opposed to like driving from the backseat. And the way and the way that you do that is through self-love. Once you get everything online and working together, then you are the sky's the limit. Whatever you desire is possible for you.
Yeah. I'm absorbing that and thinking about our conversation earlier and like what would it be like for my, let's say 13-year-old self to be my co-pilot,
Mhm,
right? And in some ways, honestly, she is. Like, I got a lot of glitter and squishmallows and
mhm,
stuffed animals around my house.
mhm,
She has contributed to that. And that's a newer phenomenon, I would say, in the last like 5 or 10 years of giving myself that permission
mhm,
of letting her voice be heard and like letting
mhm,
her be part of the living my best life is instead of letting the like narrative or story that, well, grown-ups don't like this, that, or the other thing.
mhm.
Right.
That is 100% self-love and the possibilities that open up when we move all of our repressed and suppressed parts into co-pilot mode are endless because all parts of us have value. There's no part of us that is innately wrong or bad, but like culture and societal expectations have kind of taught us that there's a certain way that we should be. Like, for example, like that as an adult, you shouldn't have squishmallows and glitter around your house. But like, is that true? Is that true for the nature of the universe? I don't think so. Right.
I don't either. I mean, I'm glad that squishmallows and glitter and unicorns are like surfacing in pop culture as like okay for adult humans to enjoy. And
Yeah.
and I'm happy to be part of that vanguard.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so, just as a fun little exercise, because I believe that all parts are valuable and have something to offer, what do you imagine that younger version of you who loved Lisa Frank and glitter, which, by the way, we would have been besties as a child if that was your
I know,
thing?
right?
Right. Yeah. What do you imagine is like her offering? You can even ask her, you visualize her in your mind. What does she bring to the table to adult you?
I mean, aside from all of those lovely things that we have already named, because like, let's be real, Squishmallows have definitely enriched my life.
Yeah.
I think like an inquisitiveness and a play, right? I mean,
Ooh.
the what all of hopefully most of our child selves like bring to the table is a willingness to play,
Mhm.
because it's adolescence and adulthood that seriousness is the play out of us.
Mhm.
I think. And I would say that like getting back in touch with her and like bringing her to the forefront has been one of the aspects of giving myself that permission,
Mhm.
to like the so-called frivolous things and to be playful and joyful and not let the world kind of beat me down quite so much.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think there's a direct line from her to this podcast, and like what we're doing here is saying that the things that bring us joy are worthy and deserving of our attention and have value and should be honored, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the message that was sort of like coming through loud and clear for me was like that she brings you joy. And that's your whole mission is to
Mhm.
bring joy and light into the world. And so here we have a very, very strong like key to like that puzzle for you of like you're
Mhm.
your younger self brings you so much joy. And what a shame it would be to box her up and to shut her down. And how ineffective would you be at bringing joy to the world and fulfilling your mission if you locked away your own source of joy or one of your own sources of joy?
Yeah. Yeah. So Dawn, what has this looked like for you? Are you willing, like, what's an example of a part of you that you've brought forward for
That's a
yourself?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I love that you asked. I was not prepared to answer that, but yeah, one of the biggest parts for me was, and I swear to God, every person who knows me as an adult is going to be like, "What the fuck?" But one of the biggest parts for me was accepting my feminine side. When I was a kid, I was bullied pretty hard, and I didn't
Mhm.
have the best like sort of family situation, and I had never experienced anything different like in my childhood at all. It was just sort of normal that I was
Mhm.
the black sheep, the outsider, and I had almost this thought of like I'm not good enough to be a girl. Like I was that if you think about like teasing other kids by saying that they like somebody, like that they have a crush on somebody, I was that somebody. And so I very much like had this like shut down, zero access to my feminine or my woman, my girl side. And now as an adult, man, I love that part of me. Like I
Yeah.
I love wearing dresses. Love doing my hair. I love basking in what feels to me like my feminine. And it's such a huge part of my identity. And it took a lot of work to get there. It took a lot of like acceptance from the outside world and also internal acceptance and like willingness to be a little vulnerable and a little uncomfortable and sort of step into what does that mean for me?
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that. I love so much about that. And the piece of that it takes work and that it's uncomfortable,
Hmm.
right? That reclaiming these parts of ourselves, that all of that, especially when we've really locked it away, right? I mean, that, like, I was also bullied as a kid, and like that 13-year-old part of me, it's been really hard for me to like welcome her in and accept her and like
Hmm.
give her the love that she didn't get at that time,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, I met you as an adult, and so similarly I was like, "Wait, what?" But
Yeah.
I love that, like, that's just such a beautiful example of what it really means to be stepping into our wholeness, and
Hmm.
how beautiful and vibrant and wonderful we can be
Yeah.
when we do that work and give ourselves that gift.
Yeah, and he's used the word wholeness, and so I want to just sort of touch on again the idea that at least I hold that you are never not whole. So for me, if I had said something to the effect when I was like younger, like let's say for example, like feminine is not part of me, or even like the shame of that I held at my feminine, all that would have done is like continue to suppress that part. If I It's like shame on top of shame on top of shame. But so the trick for me is embracing that shame, or was embracing that shame, and really like feeling through it and accepting that, oh yeah, that wound is on my body. It's part of me. It is there. And then what happened once I got through all of that shame was I found what was on the other side, and that was my feminine. So I can be a little bit of a like, oh, it's really important to kind of remember this concept of like we're never not whole. Um,
Yeah.
and it's because like our shame, our pain, our hardships are an essential part of us.
Mhm.
I mean, I guess maybe not essential, but like they are a part of us. And when we try to say that it's not our truth, it's not our being, then all we do is we have another thing that we try to put on a shelf in a box that's going to start screaming at some point, and we layer upon layer upon layer, shame upon shame upon shame.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that forward again. because I think it's a hard concept even for me in this moment to like really wrap my head around, because I when you say it, like I believe that, right? That we're never not
Mhm.
whole, we're always whole. Like
Mhm.
I fundamentally believe that no one is broken,
Mhm.
right? And like I'm struggling, like my brain thinks a lot in metaphor, and so I'm struggling to like come up with a metaphor for this. Like my brain wants to go to pie, but I don't know that that works, right? That like it's like if but let's play with it. If all of us if all of our parts are a pie and the pie is always whole,
Mhm.
right? What's
Mhm.
going on with the parts of ourselves that we don't want to look at or we don't want to access, right? Like I hear that
Mhm.
they're still there, they're always there.
Mhm.
Does
I'm
my
having a
pie
hard
metaphor yeah.
I'm having a hard time with the pie metaphor, but it's okay.
Yeah. Well, we can
Yeah,
is there a different one? Like I'm open. Like that's just where my brain's going.
Imma try to make it work, but, so if we say, for example, that, like okay, this is gonna get gross.
Let's do it. Let's do it. It's fine.
Okay. Okay.
But
So let's say we have a piece of pie
uh-huh.
and, oh my god, this is gonna get gross, but this is
It's
how it works.
is
It's
it a
like
moldy piece of pie?
well, it's gonna get moldy, so hold on.
Okay.
So let's say we have a pie, there's a piece of it that, maybe a fly has, like, landed upon, and it's let's just for now say that it's there, and that's sort of like and, I don't know, like a wound or a trauma in our life or whatever, and we don't want to address it. We just say that, like, that fly, that pain, whatever, it's not part of me. I don't accept it.
Mm,
I say it's not my truth because my truth is delight and whole and happy and joyous and yummy pie. Well, what then happens is that fly hangs out and it makes a mess and it lays some eggs and then it starts to spread. And then we have more
yeah.
flies. And so saying it doesn't exist doesn't help. It's still part of the pie. It is there and now it's spreading. So the way to move forward is to say I accept that this fly is a part of my pie. It is on the pie. And then I say maybe in this case I shoo it away. I don't know. This
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
this is as good as I can do with this
Yeah,
metaphor,
no,
but
it's great. I like it. But I mean that is really helpful, right? I mean, it gets at that like, okay, like the thing is there, whatever the thing is, and our efforts to reject it or whatever or ignore it lead to festering,
lead to
right? That is
festering.
then
Yeah.
that is then going to come out sideways, but that it is still there, and that like
Yeah.
I can clean it up by taking the medicine, by doing the
Mhm.
work,
Mhm.
right? But I think it's also important that it's like even that part, I don't get to a point where it wasn't there at some point,
Right.
right? Like
Totally.
I can clean the things, I can bring them into the light, um, but the wounds still happened, right?
Mhm.
I think that came up for me in a session a while ago of just like I don't get to a place where like the things that I found painful in my life didn't happen,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Like I just get to a place where how they show up in my life now and the ways in which I react to things is different.
Yeah, exactly. So it kind of like going back to the fly metaphor, it's like we can't it's there. It's part of the truth of the story. Ignoring it doesn't make it go away. It just leads to more festering. So we're never not whole. It's part of the truth. And so the way that we sort of move forward is not in pretending that it never happened. It's not in like saying that like hey that pain doesn't exist, that pain isn't part of me. The way that we move forward is we address the pain. We feel the pain. And then it's going to move and we get to see what's underneath. And so those hard things that have happened in the past, this is a little bit of a side tangent, but with those like hard moments in the past, there's sort of a way that until we really address the feelings and the needs of the self that experienced those painful parts, we will continue to find ourselves in situations where we can re experience that. It's like our subconscious is giving us an opportunity to do the healing. But until we're ready and
Mm,
accept, like, hey, I'm going to do the healing, it's going to keep bringing those circumstances to life so that we can. And so, if
yeah.
again, we can continue to like ignore that this is part of us and it's going to continue to show up in ways that we don't like. But once we do feel through it, well, now we have a little bit more choice. Now we have a little bit more agency to do something different and to have a different response.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that and the frustration of like, why does this keep happening in my
Hmm.
life? Right.
Hmm.
And at least in my experience, it was because I needed to continue to work on it and I needed to continue to be presented with the opportunity to do the work and the healing instead of
Hmm.
continuing to do the same thing over and over again and hoping for different results, but getting the same results.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like I probably sound a little bit like a broken record, but it is very much just how the our subconscious works and how those backstreet driver parts of us works is that they have a need and they are going to death grip onto that that steering wheel until you pause and take the time to do the work of self-love and self-care. And so I have a little kind of mini exercise that I offer people in this moment, and it's just a visualization, and it's a self-awareness practice, right?
Mhm.
It is to go back in your mind. If it's helpful for you, you can sit and meditate or you can journal. It's really up to you how you want to do this. But go back in your mind and visualize the part of you that experienced that event, whether it was a trauma or a form of bullying, and sit with that part of you. Get to know it's the feelings that that part of you is experiencing. And then ask that part of you, what do you need in this moment? What would have helped you move through this in a way that you felt good about or proud of or nourished in? And then you can almost visualize giving yourself that part of you those things. So whether it's a hug, whether it's I actually did this for myself recently, and it was like I needed somebody to hold me while I cried. And so I visualized holding the part of me that was suffering so much while I cried. And it's actually made a big difference for me in my own experience. And so now you have a little bit of a mental awareness of what it is that you need when those moments come up in the future, when you're trying to experience that sort of same thing. You have something to kind of go back to and try and test out, whether it's something you need to hear, whether it's something you need to do, whether it's something you need to ask for. Now you have some direction so that when this comes up, you aren't just stuck following the exact same pattern again and again and again and never moving.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. I know I am gonna hold on to that and come back to this conversation and that visualization the next time. Either that sort of 13-year-old part of me or one of the other parts of me that has needs surfaces.
Mhm.
I think that's a really lovely tool to take forward from this conversation. This has been such a treat. Any other invitations you have for our lovely listeners on this matter?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll just sort of go back to like really early in the call. We were kind of talking about like how it's hard when we're in chaos or crisis mode to practice self love. It's really easy when things are stable, right? And it's really hard when it's not. And so, this is one of the ways that you make it a little bit easier in the moments when things are hard. You have sort of a little bit of a plan. you have sort of a little bit of a toolkit kind of ready to go. And that's the whole point of self-awareness, is that we're practicing learning who we are and what we need. And then we can kind of shower ourselves with that compassion and care and curiosity and celebration. And so I guess the last little bit that I'll leave everybody with is that self-love is not sugar and fluff. Self-love is first a commitment to you and the relationship that you have with yourself for forever. There's no end point to this journey. It is a growth path that you are going to be on for forever. And so if you want to do this well, first step is making that commitment to you.
Mm. How lovely would it be if we could all just like really commit to ourselves? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm into it. I'm into it.
Yeah, for sure. Likewise.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Dawn, where can people find you?
So you can find me on Instagram at tempered.life. And my website is also the same thing. There's no .com, it's just tempered.life. Those are the two best places to email or to get I just said email. The two best places to get a hold of me, but you could also email me at dawn@tempered.life.
Amazing. And final question, my dear friend, what brings you joy?
What brings me joy? Oh God, so many things. Time with lovely humans like yourself and good friends and good company. Anytime I get the chance to explore the human experience and what it means to be alive and what makes life worth living, it brings me a lot of joy. But also, I travel, red pandas. That's something that like you and I have very much in common.
Oh my God, they're so cute. Oh,
Yes. Oh my
they're
God.
so great.
How could you not just be filled with joy at their little faces and giant fluffy tails?
Right? Oh,
Yeah,
red pandas are the best.
they are.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, thank you, Dawn. This has been wonderful. So good to be with you.
Likewise.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please help me grow the podcast by subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing it with anyone you think would benefit from hearing it too. Your support means the world to me. If you'd like to get updates about new episodes, posts, and offerings, please visit settlingisbullshit.com to subscribe to my newsletter. You can also find information there about working with me one-on-one to build your most amazing life. Until next time, remember that I believe in you and that you are fucking awesome.